This entrance is for active personnel. You don't look very active, old man." Walter Greene paused, the weight of his body leaning against a dark wooden cane. He didn't answer. The guard, a bulky young man in a uniform too tight around the arms, stood firm at the side entrance of the military hospital, arms crossed like a barricade. "This door's for priority access," the guard repeated. "If you can walk, you're not priority. Try the public entrance. It's around the building." Two uniformed soldiers passed behind the guard. One glanced at Walter, then muttered something under his breath and laughed. Walter slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a faded, laminated ID. "My file should be updated inside," he said quietly. "They told me, and I told you," the guard cut him off. "You had your time. Move along, Grandpa." Walter stepped back. He didn't argue, just folded the ID and tucked it away. Behind him, the automatic door hissed open. A nurse stepped out for a cigarette. She saw everything, said nothing, lit her smoke and leaned on the rail. Walter turned. His old leather case slipped from his shoulder. It popped open as it hit the ground. A manila envelope slid out, papers scattered. Among them, a photo, grainy. 5 armed soldiers in a muddy field. One of them was him. He crouched with effort, picked up the picture, stared at it for a breath. No one offered help, and Walter walked away, toward the long way in. "Before we continue, where are you watching from today? This story means more when I know who's listening. I read every comment. Really." Walter Greene walked slowly along the side of the building, his cane clicking softly on the pavement. The sun wasn't high, but it was already warm, too warm for the wool jacket he insisted on wearing. He didn't mind the heat. He minded the ache. By the time he reached the main entrance of the hospital, he was short of breath. A woman held the door open for him. She didn't smile, just looked at him the way people look at old furniture in the corner of a room, acknowledged but without thought. Walter nodded a silent thank you anyway. The lobby was cold and bright, its floors too clean, its walls too white. A young man behind the front desk called out numbers without looking up. Walter stood in line like everyone else, envelope tucked under one arm, the photograph safely returned to its place. He didn't look angry. He rarely did, just tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. When his number was called, he stepped forward and presented his documents to the woman behind the counter. Her badge read, Rachel A., Intake Specialist. Her voice was clipped and efficient. "Purpose of visit? Update to my disability ID. The VA told me to bring these." He slid the envelope across. Rachel didn't reach for it. "Are these originals?" "They're the documents I was told to bring," Walter said, keeping his voice level. A young man seated beside her, intern maybe, or just junior staff, leaned in. His badge said Logan. His smirk said everything else. "They're always told to bring something," he murmured, half to Rachel, half for himself. Walter didn't react. Rachel opened the envelope and began sorting the contents with latex-covered fingers. "These are outdated. We need a physician's statement dated within the last 90 days from a certified civilian practitioner." Walter's eyes didn't waver. "These were from the VA. I've been treated there for over a decade." "We don't take federal validations unless they've been routed through the new portal," she replied, eyes still scanning the papers. "It's a state policy, standard procedure." Logan gave a low chuckle. "Rules are rules." Walter's hand rested lightly on the cane. His knuckles had tightened just slightly. "I served this country. This leg—" He tapped the cane once, softly. "Didn't get this way by accident." Rachel sighed. "I understand, sir, but we don't make the rules. You'll need to schedule an appointment with a state-licensed provider. That's all we can accept now." Walter stood still for a long moment, not out of defiance, just gathering himself. Then, quietly, "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked away. Behind him, Logan whispered, "That guy's got more drama than a daytime special." Rachel didn't respond. Walter left the building the same way he came in, slow, deliberate, carrying the envelope like it weighed more than it did. By the time he reached the bus stop, his leg was burning. Not a sharp pain, just a dull, persistent throb like metal flexing under old stress. He lowered himself onto the bench, exhaled slowly, and looked out at the street. Life moved. Fast. Noisy. Indifferent. He reached into the envelope and took out the photo. The 5 men in the mud. He remembered the name of every single one. Only 2 were still alive. Walter didn't return home right away. Instead, he made a detour to the regional VA office on Briarwood Avenue. He hadn't been there in months, but the receptionist recognized him. Her father had served, too. She offered a small smile. He offered a small nod. "I need help updating my medical certification," he said, keeping the envelope close. "They're not accepting my records at the hospital anymore." The woman checked the system. "Your files are all current," she said. "Everything's properly coded." "I know," Walter replied. "They want civilian signatures now." She frowned. "That's unusual. I've heard worse." She guided him down a hallway to a small room with beige walls and posters that hadn't been updated in years. 10 minutes later, a caseworker came in, young, polite, apologetic. He reviewed Walter's documents and made a few calls. Eventually, he returned with the best answer he could give. "There's a process. We can expedite a referral to a state-certified provider, but even then, you're looking at a wait." "How long?" 3, maybe 4 weeks. Walter's face didn't change, but his hand shifted slightly on the armrest. "I can still walk," he said. "I'm just trying to do it without crawling." The caseworker nodded slowly. "I understand, sir. We'll do everything we can." But Walter knew how these things went. He thanked the young man and left, stepped slower now, not because of pain, but because of memory. Back home, he laid the envelope on the kitchen table. He didn't turn on the lights. The late afternoon sun spilled through the window, catching dust in the air like ash drifting in silence. The table held few items: a coffee mug, a prescription bottle, a worn Bible. A black and white photo of a woman, his wife, gone 15 years now. And next to that, a small lacquered box. He opened it. Inside, medals, citations, folded letters, yellowing pages. One by one, he laid them out like artifacts in a museum only he would visit. There was a letter from 1971, hand-signed by Captain Jonathan Kessler, a young officer back then. Brash, unproven. Alive because Walter had dragged him out of a burning APC under sniper fire. That day, Walter had lost most of the muscle in his left leg. Kessler had promised years later, "If you ever need help, even once, use this." Walter had never used it, not when his benefits were delayed, not when his home was nearly foreclosed, not when he buried his wife with no family left to sit beside him. But today, something felt different. He placed the letter carefully back into the envelope, beneath the rest of his records. Then he folded the photo of the 5 soldiers and placed it just above it, like a cover page of truth. That night, he barely slept. The pain was sharp when he lay down. But it wasn't just the leg. It was the ache of feeling discarded. The knowing that sacrifice, once applauded, now lived in footnotes and archived files. No parade, no handshake. Just systems that moved without faces. By morning, he had made a decision. He shaved, polished his shoes, brushed his jacket, and just after 9, he returned to the hospital. This time, he wasn't there to argue. He was there to remind them. Walter arrived just after the morning rush, dressed the same but different. The same jacket, yes, the same shoes. But there was something sharper about him today. Less resigned. He moved slower but straighter. He waited in line like before. The woman ahead of him was filing insurance paperwork for her son. She glanced at Walter, then at his cane, then looked away. When his number was called, he approached the desk. Same place, same clerk. Rachel looked up and blinked. "Mr. Greene," she said, with the mechanical politeness of someone remembering only because they had to. "Back again so soon?" "I brought additional documentation," Walter said quietly, sliding the same manila envelope forward. He held it with both hands for a moment before letting go. Rachel reached for it, but this time Logan, still stationed beside her, grabbed it first. "Maybe now it's got something useful," he muttered. Rachel said nothing. She let him leaf through it. Walter waited. Logan snorted. "More war stories?" He held up the folded letter from Captain Kessler like it was junk mail. "This guy really thinks we're going to approve a disability credential based on a love letter from 1971? Walter's fingers twitched slightly on the cane, but he said nothing. Rachel took the letter from Logan and opened it. Her expression didn't change at first. She read the heading, the first paragraph. Then her brow twitched. Just once. She read further and further. When she reached the signature, she froze. Her eyes scanned the name again, then again. Captain Jonathan Kessler. The same man now listed in the framed photos lining the hospital's Veterans in Public Office wall. Now State Secretary of Defense. A name that carried weight. Rachel's fingers tightened on the paper. Logan leaned in. "What?" he whispered. "What is it?" Rachel didn't answer. Instead, she looked up, actually looked, and studied Walter's face. He wasn't smug. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired. "I was told to use that only if I really had to," he said, as if confessing something private. "Thought maybe today qualified." There was silence at the desk, until someone behind them cleared their throat. It was a woman in line, older, hair pinned back, purse clutched to her chest. She stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "But did you say Jonathan Kessler?" Rachel turned slightly, still holding the letter. "Yes, ma'am," she said, more slowly now. The woman's eyes widened. "That man saved my son's life, not directly," she said, tears rising without shame, "but he commanded the mission that brought him back. We still send him Christmas cards." She fumbled in her purse, pulled out her phone. "My niece works in his office. She might—" Rachel stood abruptly. "Ma'am, there's no need." But the woman had already stepped to the side and raised the phone to her ear. She spoke in a whisper, quick, urgent. Walter just stood there. Rachel stared at the letter again. Logan had gone silent, chewing on his thumbnail now. Then, as if realizing too late the depth of the mistake, Rachel said, "Mr. Greene, I'll have to escalate this to a supervisor. Would you mind waiting?" Walter nodded once. "I've waited before," he said softly. He turned, walked to the corner of the lobby, sat down, held the envelope close. And this time, when he looked around the room, eyes met his, and didn't look away. Walter had been sitting in the corner of the lobby for just under 20 minutes when the air began to shift. It wasn't a sound at first, just a feeling, a stillness, as if the temperature dropped a degree, as if the room itself had paused. The hospital's front doors opened. 3 men entered, moving with quiet purpose. 2 wore dark suits, identical pins on their lapels. The kind of men who carried credentials they didn't flash unless absolutely necessary. They flanked a third, taller, broader, with silver at his temples and a gait that spoke of long marches and earned authority. Jonathan Kessler, now Secretary of Defense for the state, still carrying the weight of battlefield memory beneath a polished exterior. He didn't stop at the reception desk. He didn't ask for directions. He walked straight toward the center of the lobby, toward the desk where Rachel stood frozen, toward the man in the chair with the envelope in his lap. Logan stepped forward, attempting the same line he'd used before. "Excuse me, sir, if you need to check in." Kessler raised a hand, not rudely, just decisively. Logan stopped speaking. "Sergeant Walter Greene," Kessler said, his voice deep and unwavering. "Are you well, sir?" Walter looked up slowly. Their eyes met. "Kess," he said, the old nickname spoken like a private memory. The secretary gave a quiet, almost imperceptible nod. "You used it," Kessler said. "After all these years. Didn't want to, but they left me no choice." Kessler turned to Rachel. "I was informed there was an issue with his identification." Rachel couldn't find her voice. The woman with the pinned-back hair stepped closer. "I made the call. I didn't know what else to do." Kessler gave her a grateful glance. Then he turned fully to Rachel. "This man," he said, "once carried me through gunfire with half his leg torn open. He nearly died in the mud while I cried like a child on his back. He has never once asked me for anything." Rachel swallowed hard. "Sir, I didn't—" "You didn't know," Kessler finished. "I understand. But the system doesn't work without remembering who men like him are." He turned back to Walter. "We're issuing your credentials today. Lifetime access. No more lines. No more forms." Logan tried to speak again. Kessler didn't look at him. Instead, he stepped closer to Walter and crouched slightly, voice lowered. "You should have called me directly." Walter shook his head. "That letter was your last favor to me." "I wasn't going to use your name to cut in line." Kessler placed a hand on his shoulder. This wasn't cutting. This was reminding. The entire lobby was silent now. From patients to staff, all eyes were locked on them. A nurse nearby wiped her eyes with a tissue. A janitor leaned on his mop and nodded slowly. A young man in scrubs stood at parade rest without even realizing. Kessler straightened, turned back to the desk. "Get him whatever he needs. Today." Rachel nodded quickly, reaching for the keyboard. "Right away, sir." Kessler motioned to one of the men beside him. A sealed envelope was handed over. Official, immediate. Rachel took it, hands trembling slightly. Walter watched it all unfold without expression. But something behind his eyes had shifted. It wasn't victory, not exactly. It was restoration. A corner of himself that had eroded quietly over years, now beginning to form again. He stood, not easily, but firmly. And when Kessler reached to support him, Walter didn't push him away. He simply said, "Let's finish this." It didn't take long. Within 10 minutes, Walter Greene stood beside the reception desk once more, this time not as a question, but as a presence. The laminated card, his new permanent lifetime veteran ID, was printed, signed, and handed to him by the director of hospital administration himself, a man who had emerged from the back office pale and sweating. The staff hovered around with forced smiles and mumbled apologies. Walter acknowledged none of them. He turned to Secretary Kessler and said, "That's enough. Let's not make a scene." But the scene had already taken form. As he walked slowly toward the exit, flanked now by 2 security officers reappointed to escort him with honor, there was no music, no microphone, no press. Just the rustle of bodies rising to their feet. A woman stood first. Then an older man in a mobility scooter. Then a nurse in pink scrubs. Then a technician with a service dog by his side. One by one they stood. No one said a word. And then, as Walter reached the threshold, the man in the corner, an amputee with a prosthetic leg and a ball cap stitched with Vietnam 68, raised his hand in a solemn salute. Walter saw it, paused. He turned, faced the room. No smile, no tears, just a nod. Deliberate, heavy with weight. It said everything. Outside, the sky had darkened with the coming rain. The wind had picked up, but it was warm. Strangely warm for that time of year. Kessler walked with him to the curb, where a black car idled with the door open. As Walter climbed in, Kessler placed a hand on the roof and leaned in slightly. "You'll get a call later. A few people want to speak with you." "I'm not a story," Walter said. "No," Kessler replied. "You're a reminder." The door closed. The car pulled away. Back home, Walter laid the new card gently on the kitchen table beside the folded letter from 1971. He looked at both, then reached for a small nail and quietly tapped it into the wall above the table. He pinned the card there, not as a trophy, as proof. He sat down. The coffee brewed behind him, percolating soft steam into the quiet. Then the phone rang. It wasn't Kessler. It was a young voice. "Sergeant Greene?" "Yes." "You don't know me, sir, but I was told to call. I'm trying to apply for my benefits, and I heard you might understand." Walter glanced at the wall, at the letter, at the card. He didn't hesitate. "Come by next week," he said. "We'll have coffee. Bring your papers." He hung up and sat back. The world hadn't changed. Not really. But something had cracked, just enough to let a little honor back in. And that was more than enough. If this story moved you, type "still here" in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, here's your quiet reminder. Thank you for being here.